Today, in baseball, it's illegal to collide with the catcher. Prior to 2014, it was a total free-for-all. That last one right there, Scott Cousins absolutely decimating Buster Posey during a regular season game in May of 2011, was the one that changed baseball forever. Welcome to the Code of Baseball, a series where we take a look at the uniqueness of the game we all know and love, examining and breaking down the time-honored and, quite frankly, strange traditions. We'll dive into baseball history in each of these episodes and take a look at some important events and players that got us to where we are now. Let's get into it. Buster Posey was a young star at the time. The Giants had selected him in the first round of the draft 3 years prior, and in 2010, he won National League Rookie of the Year and finished 11th in NL MVP voting. Cousins, on the other hand, wasn't much of a star at all. He was relatively unknown in the baseball world, but now every fan remembers him as the one who ended home plate collisions. But why? Why did this one end it? Well, Posey's strong start to his MLB career put him among the stars in the sport, and the league probably knew for a long time that these types of plays were incredibly dangerous, but a young star like Posey suffering a major injury was the breaking point for them. No pun intended. Posey suffered a fractured fibula and tore multiple ligaments, sidelining him for the remainder of the season. But still, we've seen so many worse collisions before. This wasn't even a particularly dirty play by Cousins. It was a known part of the game, and it was just extremely unfortunate that Posey's leg bent the way it did. Cousins was blasted by the media and the Giants' general manager as well. Buster Posey ignored his phone calls, and Cousins received multiple death threats for injuring the Giants' young star, who played a large role in their World Series win a season ago. A new rule was put in place, a rule informally referred to as the Buster Posey rule. It essentially states that it is illegal for the runner to collide with the catcher, but it's also illegal for the catcher to block the plate. Goodbye to the days of catchers receiving the ball and immediately turning up the third base line, bracing for impact from a man who was going to be flying into them with a full head of steam. What's so crazy about it and what made for absolutely insane collisions is, think about the difference between this and, say, a tackle in football. In football, I mean, 1, they're wearing pads, but 2, the tackler is just trying to bring the ball carrier to the ground. In these collisions, the runner was not only trying to knock the catcher to the ground, but the part that actually mattered was jarring the ball loose. Obviously, before the rule change prior to the 2014 season, if you collided with the catcher and he held onto the ball, you were out. If he were to drop the ball, you'd be safe. To clear up any confusion, you'd be out because the technique behind bracing for impact, essentially, was that the catcher had the ball in his glove and positions it in the middle of his chest. When the runner comes flying in at full speed, he's pretty much guaranteed to run into the glove and be tagged out. But the Buster Posey incident is still crazy to me. I was a young kid when it happened, but old enough to be entrenched in baseball at that point, and I still remember exactly where I was when it happened. Even at that young age, I still had the wherewithal to wonder what Scott Cousins really did wrong. To this day, I don't think he did anything completely wrong. He played within the rules, and not only did he express immediate remorse as soon as it happened, but he's always been apologetic about it. Not only was the play perfectly legal, but it was commonplace at the time and had been for years. It was also one of the most exciting parts of baseball. And do you want to know the craziest part about the Cousins-Posey incident? Posey missed the remainder of the season, yes, and I'm sure he worked very hard in his recovery, but the following year, 2012, he won the National League MVP. The Giants also won the World Series again, and then again in 2014. Posey was the best catcher in baseball for a while and went on to make 7 All-Star games and won 5 Silver Sluggers before retiring after the 2021 season at age 34. It was a serious injury, but at the time it was viewed as career-threatening to a young star and the watershed moment for the outlawing of Homeplate collisions. But what was it really? A fairly minor blip in a strong, likely Hall of Fame career for Buster Posey. On the other side, 3 years later, Scott Cousins was out of the league and home plate collisions were banned. Now, I'm not advocating for home plate collisions. We now know today that they were incredibly dangerous, and at the time we knew it too. I don't even want to begin to think about the amount of concussions that must have been sustained during these encounters, but man, were they awesome to watch. I have nothing but respect for every catcher who put their body on the line for their team and all the runners who put themselves in harm's way as well. Let's take a look at another extremely notable and important home plate collision. It was the bottom of the 12th inning in the 1970 All-Star Game, an exhibition game that really was meaningless. From 2003 until 2016, the league that won the All-Star Game got home field advantage in the World Series. But back in 1970, the game was just as meaningless as it is today. Except the difference was that players had a deep sense of pride for the leagues they represented, and Pete Rose, member of the Cincinnati Reds, always played the game at full speed. The man nicknamed Charlie Hustle deserves an entire Code of Baseball episode to himself, but that's for another time. His passion for the game and never-ending pursuit of victory was no more evident than when he plowed through American League catcher Ray Fosse to win the game for the NL. It's got to be one of the best moments in All-Star Game history, but for Fosse, it was the worst moment of his career. His injury was initially misdiagnosed, but he later found out he had a separated shoulder. Due to the improper diagnosis, Fosse's shoulder never healed properly, and after a 1970 All-Star campaign where he received MVP votes and hit .307 with 18 homers and an .830 OPS, he went on to hit .252 with a .656 OPS for the remainder of his career. He made just one more All-Star appearance, and for the final 8 years of his career, he averaged just over 5 home runs per season. 44 years before the rule was eventually changed, shouldn't that have sealed the deal? Even fast forward to the end of his career in 1979, when it was obvious that the collision changed the course of his career and life, shouldn't it have been obvious to ban it? Why did it take 35 more years and countless more collisions? I expressed my sympathy for those who had to suffer injuries over those 3 decades plus, but maybe MLB was holding out on a rule change because collisions were simply awesome. Like Pudge Rodriguez hanging onto the ball in the 2003 National League Division Series to not only win the game, but win the series despite being tackled by JT Snow. It doesn't get any better than that. That's what every young catcher must dream of, and of course, the Marlins went on to win the World Series that year. Pudge let us know he held on. Another great moment was during the Cubs-White Sox Windy City Series in 2006. I think it's safe to say at this time everyone hated A.J. Pierzynski. On a sacrifice fly, A.J. came home and gave Michael Barrett quite the bump before slapping the plate emphatically, angering Barrett, who punched him in the face, and then the benches cleared. Years later, Barrett explained he wasn't expecting a collision and that's why he got so mad at Pierzynski. Let's thank Pierzynski for doing it, though, because he gave us a great brawl and intensified the already strong hatred between the crosstown rivals. As a Phillies fan, I always enjoyed seeing Eric Kratz's unusual technique of receiving a throw and then taking the hit while standing up. He sure knew how to hold on to a baseball, though. Overall, it's a lost art that I'm sure most baseball fans miss. There was just something so awesome about the anticipation when you knew a guy was charging home and flesh was meeting flesh at the plate in absolute barbaric fashion. You gotta miss it. That does it for this episode of The Code of Baseball. Be on the lookout for more episodes in this series and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of them. Leave a like on this video and comment your thoughts or opinions. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.